Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Natasha. I'm a designer and creative director working in the Bay Area. My current role is with Sephora, which, if you're not familiar, is a global beauty brand. And I've been there about 5 years. I manage a team of designers and art directors, concepting and executing campaigns and branding projects that span across video, mobile, print, and our retail environment.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. I have your slides pulled up, so just say next slide when it's time to advance, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, great. So I chose this subject today not because I'm necessarily the world's top expert, but I have felt firsthand how damaging self-doubt can be. I think I'm really good at what I do, and I consistently receive positive feedback on my work, and yet, despite all this, I have this nagging, mean girl voice in my head, and it tries to constantly focus my attention on the negative. She points out all of my mistakes and plants a seed of self-doubt over and over again. But thankfully, I have learned some valuable tricks that help keep that voice in my head from taking over. It's my hope that by sharing my experience with you in an open and honest way, that I may help some of you also silence your self-doubts, or at least turn the volume down just a little bit. So next slide. So I wanted to just start with a simple definition. So imposter syndrome is defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. But I'm a visual person, so I'd like to give you a little visualization of this. So next slide. So this is what I think it feels like without imposter syndrome and without self-doubt. So maybe you have just gotten a project that you really like, or a promotion, or you started a new role you're excited about, and this is how at least I feel. You know, my brain is happy and I see daisies and everything is great. Next slide. And then this is how I feel once imposter syndrome has set in. So for me, this shows up as starting to second guess everything. It often comes in the form of racing and repeated negative thoughts, and it can feel really confusing and overwhelming. Next slide. So these feelings show up differently for different people. Sometimes we just can't internalize our successes. We may find ourselves making up a series of excuses to counter the compliments that we're receiving, or it can cause us to focus on one tiny and often really inconsequential mistake. Next slide, please. So essentially, however this shows up for you, it's really taking something that is positive and turning it into an experience that actually feels really negative. Next slide. So this is, can be really damaging. All of these sort of negative thoughts or ghosts in your head can have a lot of effects on us, and it may be that it causes resistance to risk-taking, which has all sorts of implications, not only in the workplace, but also in your everyday life. It can decrease job performance, cause low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, and burnout. Next slide, please. So, according to the Journal of Mental Health and Clinical Psychology, employees who persistently question their professional legitimacy may also be at a higher risk for experiencing adverse psychological outcomes with implications for career retention and advancement. So this syndrome is, it's preventing us from filling up the space that we deserve, and it's preventing more women from filling up the space in these higher positions. And this is obviously not a good thing. Next slide. So it's estimated that about 70% of people experience these imposter feelings at some point in their lives. And, imposter syndrome can affect people in all walks of life, but it over-indexes with women. So if we want to see ourselves succeed, it's critical that we learn to manage these negative thoughts. And the first step to doing this is to recognize that it's happening and identify how it's showing up for you. So this slide is showing you some different personas. So these have been identified by some research, and I'd like to just walk you through some key points for these. So the first one is perfectionist, and this is the one that I think I really identify with. If you fall under this bucket, you set extremely high expectations for yourself. And even if you're meeting, 99% of your goals or those expectations, that 1% just kills you and it can make you feel like a failure. Even small mistakes make you question your own competence. If you are an expert, so you may feel the need to just know everything. It's not enough that you know most. And this really comes into play a lot, I think, with job applications. So we've all seen these crazy long lists of requirements for different job postings. And if you don't suffer from imposter syndrome, you're going to put yourself out there. You might say, I've got most or enough of the skills listed. But if you are an expert and you suffer from imposter syndrome, you're not even going to go ahead and apply. You won't take that risk. And so that can be also really damaging and keep you from even reaching out for these opportunities. If you're a natural genius, you may be someone who things come really easily to you, but when you actually are faced with something that then is challenging, it makes you question, your competence and your skills. And obviously, of course, that's not true. All of the people that we idolize, they've all had to work to get where they are. They may have intelligence, but they still have to put in the work to get there. If you're a soloist, so you feel the need to do things on your own. This one's a little bit more self-explanatory. And, you don't want to ask for help because the asking for help and the reaching out to others makes you feel like a failure or a fraud. And obviously this one is, really has a lot of implications because, especially in business, you constantly have to rely on other people, especially if you're managing a team. But, always it's so important to ask other people for help and to get that support. And then finally, the Superman or Superwoman. So if you fall under this bucket, you feel the need to push yourself harder than those around you. And, I think there's nothing wrong with working really hard, but this becomes damaging when, you just feel the need to work all the time and to feel perfect and to be feeling like you have to do everything, and this doesn't just apply to work, but across all areas of your life. Okay, so now that we've all identified, which bucket we fall in, maybe year 1 or 2, then, what do we do about it? How do we move on from here? So next slide. So I think a really great place to start is to stop telling women that they have imposter syndrome. And, there was a paper with this title that was written and published in the Harvard Business Review. And there's a lot to unpack in there. I'm not going to go into all of it now, but I think it made some really great points. And the first one is that, there's something really demoralizing about the name imposter syndrome. It's become such a commonplace term that it's possible that we've actually begun to internalize this idea of being an imposter when in fact, perfectionism and self-doubt, they don't make you an imposter. You're not sick, you're not crazy, you're human. Feeling unsure is a human thing. Another issue is that it completely ignores a lot of the underlying causes of this so-called syndrome. So as women, and even more so if you happen to be a woman of color, you likely have been conditioned by your environment, by the media, that either misrepresents you, if it represents you at all. You've most likely endured micro and probably not so microaggressions, and these have all piled up over a lifetime. The experiences, that you've had, they affect you and they affect your thinking and behavior. And they can fuel these negative voices in your head And it puts the blame on yourself instead of the people and places around you that created them. So, personally, I've been very lucky to work with women and lead teams of people who have championed my success. But I wasn't born into that place. I carry with me all of the expectations, both good and bad, that came before. So it's really important, I think, to see this in context and to start calling out ourselves by kinder names. And to not just focus on our symptoms, but to put attention and energy on the cause and create a larger cultural shift. But in order to do this, we need to reframe the way we look at the so-called syndrome, and we need to start by learning to reframe our negative thoughts. So this brings me to my next step and next slide. Okay, so this is Brené Brown. Many of you have probably heard of her or even seen her famous TED Talks or Netflix special. But for those of you who aren't familiar with her, she refers to herself as a shame researcher. And I think there's a lot of correlation between her work and the effects of imposter syndrome. But there's one thing that she talks about in particular that really stuck with me. You can watch her whole talk and get the full story. But here's kind of the shorter version. So as humans, we really love to fill in the gaps in our narrative. We're constantly making up stories, and whether we're conscious of it or not. But we can condition ourselves to notice when this is happening and call it out. So what she says is, the story I'm telling myself is. And the idea is that you have to stop, ask yourself what that story is, and then fact check it for reality. And this has been such a powerful tool for me when negative thoughts start to take over. If I'm able to recognize what is happening and stop my brain for just a second, I start to pick apart the stories, and it becomes really clear to me how much I have filled in and how little based in reality these stories often are. So, in the spirit of Brené, we're going to walk through some common imposter syndrome thoughts and do a little reframing exercise. So, next slide. All right, so I like to call this series the imposter defense. Similar to the cartoon that I shared earlier, these kind of show up as a defense to some other positive feedback or experiences that you may have been getting. So this first one is, I just got lucky that time. And the reframe of that, if you go to the next slide. Okay, so my education, experience, and hard work led me to the right solution. So it may feel like luck, but if you really examine it and step back for a second, I think that you will realize that it's actually the culmination of, all of your experience, your education, and your hard work. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so this one, I just had the right connections. Okay, so the reframe for this, if we go to the next slide. So instead, we can say the time and energy I put into building and maintaining my personal and professional network paid off. So, making and maintaining good connection, it's not a flaw. It's actually a key skill and a sign that you're on your way to success. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using your network, and it certainly doesn't undermine or lessen your skill set or abilities. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one, it wasn't really me. I had a lot of help. And the reframe for this, if we go to the next slide. Getting help is a privilege, not a handicap. So I would even go so far as to say that getting help is a necessity. I've always had to rely on others to get my work done. But especially now that I manage a team, this is even more important. Trusting and relying on them is the only way that I'm going to get the work done. And as I move farther and farther away from the physical day-to-day design as a manager, I have learned to shift my mindset and celebrate my efforts and ability to draw out the best work in those around me. The more help that I get from my team, the more successful I consider myself to be. Next slide. Oh, yes. So this one, I made it up as I went along. All right, so let's reframe this one. We go to the next slide. Okay, so instead, my strengths helped me navigate ambiguity and learn new skills, which led to success. So I consider myself to be successful, but I am constantly making it up as I go along. In fact, it's actually one of the favorite parts of my job because it means that I am growing and constantly learning new things. It's what keeps it interesting for me. A promotion or a new role is always going to have new challenges, and you don't have to have all the answers. You just need to approach the challenges with a sense of honesty and curiosity. Being able to admit that you don't know the answer, but then ask the right questions is also a path to success. And all sorts of past experiences can help you problem solve. That's what you're there for, not because you already have the answer, but because you have the skills and experience to figure it out. Okay, next slide, please. If I can do it, so can pretty much anyone. All right, so let's go to the next slide for the reframe of this one. Other people's potential does not invalidate my success. I put in the work necessary to achieve my goals. So yes, of course it's possible that, other people with the right training may be able to do your job, but who cares? You're the one that put in the time and the energy. I think it's true for many industries, but particularly in my industry, there's so many right answers. My creative solution will be different from another creative who gets the same brief, and that's okay. There's plenty of work and room for more than one right answer. So, next slide. Okay, so in summation, this is kind of a bit of a three-step plan. So the first thing, if you take nothing else away, I think a really great action point is to be an ally. You can help create positive work environments for the people around you and the next generation. You can help condition each other for success. And then potentially, we just as a group won't have to suffer so much from this experience. I also would encourage you to be brave and be honest. Give yourself permission to not be perfect, and then even say it out loud. Say it to a colleague that you trust, or even your team. This is something I've done with my team a lot, where I will just say up front, I don't know the answer, or I'm working on this. And it really takes the pressure off and has been a great tool for also opening up lines of communication. And then finally, learn to question your own narrative, identify your conditioning for what it is, and then try to approach the world with the fearlessness of a child. The successful people that you admire have all failed at some point or another. Success isn't about perfection or the lack of failure. It's about the willingness to learn and try again. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So we're back at the happy brain. Hopefully this presentation will help you get back to this place. I really believe that if you come from a place of honesty and learning, that magic things can happen. But reframing your mindset takes time, so please be patient with yourself. Thank you.
Well, Natasha, thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. So yeah, just a reminder, if anyone would like to ask a live question, you can hit 5-star. And I can unmute you and ask a live question. So we've had a lot of questions that have come in about confidence. So I'm just going to go try this question from Melanie. Melanie says, any advice for any good confidence sharing exercises?
Sure. So I think, there's a lot of different things you can do, and it kind of depends on, your personality and how you work. I think practicing with someone, if you're someone who worries about presentations, for example, finding somebody that you trust to practice with and, putting in the prep is a good thing that can help with confidence. But I also think it's good to kind of write down all of the good parts about yourself. And when you, just don't focus on all the things that can go wrong. Like, just focus on the fact that, like, even if you don't do it perfectly, there's always something to be learned in that execution. And I think you kind of have to help take away the fears and just focus on the positive, and then it becomes a little less scary and hopefully will help you have more confidence.
Well, that's wonderful. Okay, so I think we have 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap for the afternoon, because we've had a lot of questions that are very similar. So this next question comes from Casey, and Casey says, a colleague has imposter syndrome, and she micromanages every meeting, even if she's not the lead on a project, and it adds a lot of time to the meetings. What is the best way to put her at ease or manage this, because she can do the job?
Okay. I mean, this one's a little hard because, team dynamics are always a tricky thing. But I would say, just coming from a place of like honesty and really wanting to truly help her, find a safe environment to talk to her about it in. It's not something good to call out in front of a team, but I think you can find a safe space to address it, and then make sure that, when you are talking to her about it, that it doesn't become, a blaming situation. Be careful with the words that you use, and talk about more how it would help the team and how doing these things, would kind of help everyone succeed. I think one of the things I've learned in being a manager is that, everybody hears feedback in different ways. Everybody internalizes feedback differently. And it's really important that when you're having conversations with people that you really take into account how they're going to receive it, and try to focus it around, what those behavioral changes will accomplish for the other person and not just yourself.
Oh, that's wonderful. So I think this will be our final question for the day, and then we'll ask you for last thoughts. So this question came from Paulina, and she says, I love the way you reframed all the thoughts in my head, but how is a good way to share accomplishments without bragging?
Well, it depends on what context it's in, but I think, it's really about the intention behind it. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your work, but, sometimes it's as simple as not making it about the me, or the I, right? Like, I think even if you are an individual contributor, there's probably still a lot of other people who have worked on it in some capacity or another, and you can talk about successes, but talk about it as a team, or talk about why it was great and what you learned, without having it feel just like a brag. So I think it's really just about being honest with the intention about why you're sharing it, and sharing it in the right moment.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Well, Natasha, as we end, do you have any final words of wisdom for all our listeners today?
Oh, I think I'm out of words of wisdom. I think just if this is something you suffer from, like, I get it. It's an ongoing process, and just be kind to yourself. Make it a daily exercise, and the more you put it into practice, the more it will pay off. But, it's never going to go away completely, so have a little grace with yourself, and that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our speakers today, both our panel members and our keynote speakers, and thank you to all our listeners as well. Without all of you, these events would not be possible. So let's continue to support women's leadership and learn from one another. So be safe, be kind to yourselves, and be well. So until next time, this is Ginger Whatley signing off. Have a great evening, everyone.